The laboratory hummed with a symphony of alien technology, plasma coils arcing with pale light, holographic readouts flickering with incomprehensible symbols, and the faint, rhythmic pulse of containment fields lining the room. Dr. Zither, a renowned scientist of the Threxian Alliance, stood before a suspended tank of translucent liquid, his 6 spindly limbs twitching nervously. Inside the tank floated a human, unconscious, and clad in battle-worn armor. The specimen was an enigma. A living weapon, as Zither's superiors had called it, extracted from the aftermath of a brutal skirmish on the desolate planet of Gantoris 4. The Alien Council had insisted that understanding these humans was paramount. How a species so biologically fragile could wreak such havoc on civilizations far more advanced than their own was a mystery that needed solving. Zither's assistant, Vran, sidled up beside him, her wide, multifaceted eyes reflecting the eerie glow of the tank. "It's unsettling, isn't it?" she said, her voice a soft hum. "Such a small, unimpressive creature, yet it brought down 2 entire battalions." "It's not just unsettling," Zither muttered, his voice wavering. "It's terrifying. There's no logic to their methods. They act against all patterns of predictable behavior. It's as though chaos itself flows through their veins." Vran tapped on her datapad, her antennae flicking nervously. "The Council expects results. They want to know what drives these creatures." Zither sighed, his translucent throat sacs inflating briefly in frustration. "And what if the answer is nothing we can quantify? What if their strength lies in the very thing we fear to comprehend, chaos unchecked by reason?" Before Vran could respond, the tank emitted a soft chime. The human's vital signs stabilized, and its eyes fluttered open. Zither instinctively took a step back, his limbs trembling as the human began to move. Though restrained by the containment field, its gaze was sharp and calculating, as though it were already analyzing its surroundings. "Welcome," Zither said cautiously, activating a universal translator. "You are a guest of the Threxian Alliance. Please do not attempt to resist. We mean you no harm." The human tilted its head, its expression shifting to one of mild amusement. "Guest? Is that what you call kidnapping now?" Zither hesitated. "We brought you here to understand. Your species is an anomaly. We wish to study how you fight, how you survive." The human smirked. "Study me? That's a dangerous game you're playing, Doc." Vran stepped forward, her voice firmer. "You're in no position to make threats. You're unarmed and restrained." The human chuckled, a sound that sent a shiver down Zither's spine. "You don't get it, do you? It's not the weapons that make us dangerous." "And what does?" Zither asked, his voice barely a whisper. The human leaned forward, the containment field crackling faintly under the pressure. "The fact that we don't stop. You can try to cage us, break us, even kill us. But the moment you think we're finished, that's when you've already lost." Zither exchanged a nervous glance with Vran. For the first time in his career, he wondered if this experiment might end with answers they were not ready to face. The human sat still in the containment field, though the faint flicker of energy around it seemed to pulse in rhythm with its movements. Dr. Zither leaned closer to his holographic display, analyzing every data point the containment sensors could collect: heart rate, neural activity, muscle tension. Yet none of it explained the gnawing unease that had begun to creep into the lab since their guest had woken up. "Something's wrong," Vran muttered, pacing behind him. "The readings don't make sense. Their stress response spikes and falls without reason, as if they control it consciously. No other species has shown this level of neural control under captivity." Zither adjusted the display, his mandibles twitching in frustration. "Perhaps it's a response to fear." The human chuckled, its voice resonating eerily through the translator. "Fear? You think I'm scared of you?" Zither froze. The translator had only been set to interpret incoming speech, not outgoing thoughts. How had it heard the human? Vran stiffened, her antennae flicking toward the human. "Dr. Zither, check the containment field stability." Zither swiped frantically through the console. "The field is intact. It's operating at full capacity." But the human was smiling now, a calm, unsettling grin that didn't fit the circumstances. "Here's the thing about humans," it said, leaning casually against the invisible barrier. "You're trying to measure us with your little tools, your perfect algorithms. But we don't fit inside your boxes." Zither felt his chest tighten. The human wasn't struggling, wasn't attempting to break free, yet the containment field's energy output was fluctuating, rippling as though pushed by an unseen force. The readings on the console began to spike erratically. "Doctor, we need to reinforce the field," Vran hissed, stepping back. "This isn't normal." Zither's claws danced across the console. "I'm increasing the energy output by 20%. That should." The containment field sparked violently, causing Zither to recoil. The human tilted its head, its expression unchanging. "You think force is the answer? That's your first mistake." Zither's voice wavered as he addressed the human. "You don't understand. We need to study you. The Council believes understanding your species could prevent unnecessary bloodshed." "Bloodshed?" the human repeated, its tone mocking. "You want to know what causes bloodshed? It's not us. It's you, poking and prodding and thinking you can control what you don't understand." The lab shook slightly as the containment field emitted a deep, resonant hum. Vran scrambled to adjust the stabilization controls, but nothing seemed to work. "The system's not responding. It's like the human is feeding off the field itself." "That's impossible!" Zither shouted. Yet, as he spoke, the energy around the containment field pulsed brighter and brighter, casting long shadows across the lab. The human inside was calm, almost serene, as if it were waiting for something. Vran's voice cracked under the pressure. "If we can't stabilize the field, it's going to overload. Doctor, we need to evacuate." "No!" Zither snapped, his pride outweighing his fear. "If we abandon the lab, we lose everything we've learned." "What have we learned, Zither?" Vran demanded. "That humans defy every rule we know. That they're more dangerous than we thought?" Before Zither could respond, the containment field exploded in a burst of light, sending both Threxians sprawling to the floor. The alarms in the lab wailed as smoke filled the air, and sparks rained down from overloaded circuits. Zither struggled to his feet, his limbs trembling as he scanned the room. The human was standing now, free of its restraints. Its battle-worn armor glinted in the flickering light, and its eyes burned with a cold, calculating intensity. It stepped forward slowly, its movements deliberate. "Sit down," Zither stammered, his voice barely audible. "You can't escape. The lab is locked down." The human glanced at the sealed doors, then back at Zither. "Escape? Who said I wanted to leave?" Vran raised her weapon, a plasma-based device designed for containment breaches, but her hands were shaking. "Stay where you are!" she barked. The human didn't even flinch. "You know, I've seen species like yours before," it said, its tone conversational. "Empires that think their science can solve every problem. But the one thing you can't quantify is willpower." Zither swallowed hard. "Willpower doesn't override physics. It doesn't break containment fields." The human's smirk widened. "Doesn't it?" With a sudden burst of movement, the human lunged forward, faster than either alien could react. It grabbed Vran's weapon and twisted it out of her grasp, disassembling it with fluid precision. Before she could scream, the human placed a hand on her shoulder, not violently, but firmly. "I don't want to hurt you," it said, its voice steady. "But you need to understand, you can't cage us. You can't study us like lab rats. We're not just flesh and blood. We're something you can't control." Zither's legs gave out, and he collapsed to the floor, his entire body trembling. What are you?" The human turned to him, its expression softening for the first time. "Survivors," it said simply. "That's all we are. And that's all we'll ever need to be." The lab was silent except for the faint hum of the failing systems. Zither knew that the Council's curiosity had gone too far. They hadn't captured a specimen, they had unleashed something far more dangerous. And now, he wasn't sure the galaxy was ready for what came next. Zither's mind raced as the human stood over him, towering like a predator sizing up its prey. Vran, still frozen in shock, watched helplessly as the human casually dismantled what remained of the lab's containment systems, tossing aside panels and devices like discarded toys. The lab's emergency lights bathed the scene in an ominous red glow, casting long shadows that seemed to stretch and twist with each flicker. "Let me make this clear," the human said, its tone unnervingly calm as it inspected a piece of alien machinery. "I'm not interested in killing anyone. But if you think you can experiment on us, figure out what makes us tick, and then turn that against us, well, let's just say you're playing with fire." Zither finally found his voice, though it trembled with fear. Our intentions were not hostile. The Council wanted to understand your kind to avoid further conflict." The human stopped and turned, fixing Zither with a piercing stare. "Avoid conflict? By kidnapping me? By poking and prodding like I'm some kind of puzzle to solve?" Vren spoke up, her voice shaking. "You have to understand, we didn't mean to offend your kind. The Council sees humanity as unpredictable, dangerous. They believe you're a threat to galactic stability." "Unpredictable," the human echoed, almost amused. "That's a polite way of saying you don't understand us." "It's true," Zither admitted, his mandibles clicking nervously. "You defy logic, reason, and predictability. Every species we've encountered follows patterns, strategies we can anticipate. But humans? You act on instinct, emotion, and chaos." The human smiled, a faint, knowing smirk. "Chaos. You finally get it. Chaos isn't a weakness, Doc. It's a weapon." Before Zither could respond, the lab's main console crackled to life. A stern, alien voice filled the room, amplified by static. "Dr. Zither, this is Captain Vralik of the Threxian Defense Fleet. We are aware of the breach in your lab. Containment failure has been logged. Report immediately." Zither froze, his panic surging anew. He glanced at the human, who was now casually leaning against the console, seemingly unfazed by the situation. The voice repeated, sharper this time. "Dr. Zither, respond. You should answer them," the human said, gesturing lazily at the console. "Wouldn't want them to think something's wrong." Zither hesitated but stepped forward, activating the comm system with trembling claws. "This is Dr. Zither. We are managing the situation." Captain Vralik's tone was cold. "Managing? Sensors indicate a containment breach. What is the status of the specimen?" Zither's throat sacs inflated briefly, a reflexive sign of stress. "The specimen is secure." The human chuckled softly, loud enough for Zither to hear but not the captain. It leaned closer to Zither, whispering, "Better keep them convinced. You wouldn't want them to send reinforcements." Captain Vralik's voice cut through the tension. "We are dispatching a containment team to your location. Do not let the specimen escape. The Council will not tolerate failure." The comm line went dead, leaving an oppressive silence in its wake. Vran turned to Zither, her multifaceted eyes wide with fear. "They'll kill us if they think we've lost control." "No," Zither said quietly. "They'll kill all of us if this escalates." The human clapped its hands, the sound startlingly loud in the quiet room. "Well, it sounds like we're on a timer. Reinforcements are coming, and I'm guessing they're not here to negotiate." "You don't understand," Zither said, his voice desperate. "If they find you free, they'll assume the worst. They'll destroy this facility, and everyone in it just to contain you." The human tilted its head, as if considering this. "So, what's your plan, Doc? Because I'm not going back in that tank." Zither glanced at Vran, who shook her head, clearly at a loss. Then he looked back at the human. You could escape. If we disable the facility's lockdown protocols, you could leave before the containment team arrives." "And what happens to you too?" the human asked, its tone pointed. "They're not going to let this slide." Zither hesitated, the weight of the situation crushing down on him. "That's not your concern." The human leaned closer, its expression hard. "It is my concern. You think I want more blood on my hands? If your people get wiped out because of me, I'll carry that with me." So no, Doc, we're finding another way. Vren spoke up, her voice hesitant but firm. There's a secondary exit in the lower levels. It's not on the official schematics. If we lead you there, you could escape without triggering the external sensors. Zither blinked in surprise. Vran, that's treason. If they find out, they'll kill us anyway, she snapped. At least this way, we have a chance. The human studied her for a moment, then nodded. Smart. Let's do it. The journey to the lower levels was tense. The facility's automated systems buzzed and whirred around them, oblivious to the escalating crisis. Zither and Vran led the way, their movements hurried but cautious. The human followed closely, its presence a constant reminder of the precarious balance they were attempting to maintain. Are all humans like you? Vran asked quietly as they descended a dimly lit staircase. The human smirked. What, unstoppable? No, Vran said, her voice soft. Unrelenting. The human's expression turned thoughtful. Most of us, yeah? It's kind of what we do. When everything's against us, we dig in and fight harder. Zither glanced back, his curiosity momentarily overriding his fear. But why? What drives that instinct? The human shrugged. Survival. Hope. Stubbornness. Take your pick. They reached the lower levels, where the air was cooler and the lights dimmer. Vran guided them to a concealed hatch, hidden behind a panel of machinery. She activated the release mechanism, and the hatch slid open with a soft hiss. There, she said, gesturing to the dark tunnel beyond. This leads to the surface, outside the containment perimeter. The human stepped forward but paused, turning back to Zither and Vran. You're risking everything to help me. Why? Zither hesitated, then sighed. Because you're right. We don't understand your kind. But maybe that's not a reason to fear you. Maybe it's a reason to learn from you. The human's gaze softened, and for the first time, Zither thought he saw something in its eyes that wasn't danger, but something closer to gratitude. Without another word, the human stepped into the tunnel, disappearing into the shadows. As the hatch closed, Zither and Vran stood in silence, the weight of their actions settling over them. They had defied their counsel, their orders, and their own fear, all for a chance to do something right. Above them, the facility shuddered as the containment team arrived, but Zither felt no regret. For the first time, he understood what made humans so terrifying, and so extraordinary. Chaos wasn't just their weapon. It was their strength. The tunnel stretched into darkness, the faint hum of machinery the only sound as the human moved swiftly, its steps sure and deliberate. Zither and Vran stood at the sealed hatch, their hearts pounding as the weight of what they had done began to sink in. Above them, the distant sound of the containment team's arrival reverberated through the facility, the heavy thud of boots signaling the beginning of an inevitable reckoning. Vran broke the silence first. They'll interrogate us, won't they? Zither nodded grimly. The council will demand answers. We defied protocol. That's treason in their eyes. And yet, we did what was right, Vran said, her voice steady despite the fear in her gaze. Didn't we? Zither looked at the hatch, his mind replaying the human's words. Asterisk, you can't cage us. You can't study us like lab rats. We're not just flesh and blood. We're something you can't control. Asterisk, for the first time, Zither felt the weight of those words not as a threat but as a challenge, an invitation to see beyond the confines of his logic-driven world. Yes, Zither said softly. We did what was right. The human emerged from the tunnel into the open air, the facility now a shadow in the distance. The planet's night sky was alien and unfamiliar, but the stars above were the same, a constant reminder of the vastness of the galaxy and humanity's place within it. For a moment, the human paused, breathing deeply, letting the tension drain from its body. It didn't take long for the sound of distant engines to shatter the quiet. The containment team wasn't far behind, and it was clear they wouldn't stop until the human was captured, or eliminated. The human activated a small device on its wrist, a signal beacon it had managed to conceal even during its capture. Within moments, a sleek, Earth-made stealth ship emerged from the clouds, its engines whisper quiet as it descended. A ramp extended, and the human sprinted aboard, the vessel lifting off before its feet fully touched the deck. Inside the ship, the human removed its helmet, revealing a face etched with determination. A voice crackled over the comms. "Captain Mason, we've got you. What's the status of the mission?" Mason smirked, sitting down in the command chair. "Mission accomplished. And we learned something important. Care to elaborate?" the voice asked. Mason leaned back, his gaze fixed on the stars. "They fear us. Not because of our weapons or our numbers, but because they don't understand what drives us. They see chaos, but what they don't realize is that chaos is survival. Chaos is innovation. And chaos is what makes us unstoppable." Back in the facility, Zither and Vran were escorted to the main control room, where Captain Vralik stood waiting. His imposing figure loomed over the console, his eyes narrow and piercing. The containment team filled the room, their weapons drawn, though the human was long gone. Vralik turned slowly to face Zither and Vran. "Explain." Zither hesitated, glancing at Vran, who remained silent but resolute. Finally, he spoke. "The specimen escaped. The containment systems failed." Vralik's mandibles twitched, his expression unreadable. "Convenient," he said coldly. "You expect me to believe this was an accident?" "It wasn't an accident," Vran said, stepping forward. Her voice was steady, though her antennae betrayed her nerves. "It was a lesson." Vralik's eyes narrowed. "A lesson?" Zither took a deep breath. "We've been trying to understand the humans, dissect their strategies, analyze their behavior, but we've been looking at them all wrong. They aren't like us. They don't fit into patterns or systems. Their strength isn't in their weapons or their tactics. It's in their unpredictability. Their willpower." Vralik's gaze hardened. "And you thought releasing one of them was the best way to prove that point?" "No," Zither admitted. "But keeping them here, trying to control them, would have been worse. You can't cage chaos. All we would have done is provoke them further." Vralik was silent for a long moment, his gaze shifting between the two scientists. Finally, he turned to the containment team. "The Council will be informed of this failure. But I suspect they will agree that further attempts to detain a human are unwise." The soldiers exchanged uneasy glances but said nothing. Vralik turned back to Zither and Vran. "You will both report to the Council and explain your actions. And you will ensure they understand the implications of what you've learned." Zither nodded, relief washing over him. "Thank you, Captain." "Don't thank me," Vralik said sharply. "The Council may spare you, but they won't forget this. And neither will I." Weeks later, Zither stood before the Council, presenting his findings. The holographic display behind him showed the human in the containment field, the fluctuating energy readings, and the chaotic, unquantifiable behavior that had defied every prediction. "Their strength lies in their adaptability," Zither explained. "Their refusal to conform to predictable patterns. They turn weakness into strength, chaos into strategy. And when pushed to the brink, they become something even more dangerous, relentless." The Council members exchanged wary glances, their bioluminescent patterns shifting in subtle waves of unease. One of them, a senior member with deep grooves etched into their exoskeleton, spoke. "And your recommendation, Dr. Zither?" Zither hesitated. "We must learn to work with them, not against them. If we continue to see humanity as a threat, we will only escalate the conflict. But if we find common ground, there may be a way forward, one that doesn't end in mutual destruction." The Council was silent for a long moment, the weight of Zither's words settling over them like a storm cloud. Finally, the senior member spoke again. "Your insights are noted, Dr. Zither. We will deliberate further." As Zither left the chamber, Vran met him in the corridor, her expression unreadable. "Do you think they'll listen?" "I don't know," Zither admitted. "But if they don't, they'll learn the hard way." Above them, the stars stretched endlessly, a reminder of the vastness of the galaxy, and the chaos that now rippled through it. Humanity was out there, unpredictable and relentless, and Zither knew one thing for certain: the galaxy would never be the same.